On August 24, 2001, Air Transat Flight 236 was operating as a routine red-eye. Over 300 people were asleep in the cabin as the commercial jet cruised above the pitch-black Atlantic Ocean. In the darkness outside, thousands of pounds of aviation fuel were venting from the right wing, straight into the night sky. Inside the cockpit, however, it was completely quiet. Not a single alarm warned the crew. This silence came down to a technological blind spot. This specific Airbus A330 lacked a direct automated sensor designed to alert pilots if fuel was actively leaking out of the aircraft. The first sign of trouble was a standard fuel imbalance advisory. It showed that fuel levels were significantly lower on the right side of the plane than the left. Facing this, the pilots assumed they were dealing with a routine computer glitch. To fix what they thought was a simple weight distribution issue, the pilots made a critical procedural error. Instead of consulting the emergency checklist for a suspected fuel leak, they attempted to resolve the imbalance entirely from memory. Relying on memory, they opened the crossfeed valve. This mechanism lets fuel flow between the left and right tanks to equalize weight. By opening it, they actively pumped their remaining healthy fuel across the plane, dumping it straight out the compromised wing. The missing sensor left the crew in the dark, and their routine assumptions led them to act without confirming the facts. This combination transformed a mechanical failure into a ticking time bomb, rapidly draining their lifeline into the ocean. To find the source of that rupture, we have to look back 9 days. Inside an Air Transat maintenance hangar, mechanics were racing against a tight Sunday deadline to get the aircraft ready for its next flight. The team needed to replace the right engine. Because the airline didn't have an exact spare, they had to install an older, loaned Rolls-Royce engine onto the newer aircraft frame. Crucial information about how to handle the incompatible parts between these engine designs was located on an offline CD-ROM. In the rush to meet the deadline, nobody checked it. The lead technician decided to take a dangerous shortcut. He successfully fitted the newer fuel tubes onto the engine, but left the older hydraulic tubes in place, forcing them into the same cramped housing. This mixed installation forced the metal tubes too close together in a confined space. Over 9 days, flight vibrations caused the incompatible tubes to grind continuously. The friction wore down the metal until an L-shaped crack finally ruptured the fuel line high above the Atlantic. The disaster over the Atlantic was the direct mathematical result of a missing CD-ROM and a single rushed shortcut on the ground. At 6:13 a.m. on the night of the flight, the leak finally caused the right engine to starve of fuel and shut down entirely. The crew initially remained hopeful. Modern twin-engine planes are certified to fly safely on a single engine in an emergency. They began their descent, still unaware that the open crossfeed valve had already drained the left engine's fuel supply as well. 13 minutes later, the left engine died. Flight 236 was now a 200-ton unpowered glider carrying 306 people, falling through the sky at 34,000 feet. The constant hum of the jet engines vanished, replaced by a deafening silence. The electrical lighting failed, and the only sound left was the roar of the wind rushing past the fuselage. They were totally isolated, gliding downward over a freezing, pitch-black ocean, with no engine power to maintain their altitude. With the main generators offline, their only lifeline was the ram air turbine. This small wind propeller dropped from the belly of the plane, generating just enough hydraulic power to allow the pilots to move the flight controls. Captain Robert Pichet knew they couldn't reach Europe. He banked the heavy glider toward a tiny, obscure military airstrip in the Azores, aiming for a runway they could barely see. There was no option for a second attempt. Without engines, there was no possibility of a go-around if they missed the approach. Survival now rested entirely on the physics of a perfect glide. Dropping through the darkness, the pilots finally spotted the runway lights of Lajes Air Base. They committed to a steep, rapid descent, relying entirely on their momentum to reach the tarmac. Touching down without engines meant the plane had no reverse thrust to help it slow down. The pilots had to rely on extreme, destructive mechanical braking to absorb the aircraft's massive energy. They hit the Lajes runway hard. The pilots immediately slammed on the emergency brakes, causing the wheels to lock and the tires to explode. Friction ground the metal rims against the concrete until sparks ignited small fires in the landing gear. The plane finally ground to a halt. In less than 2 minutes, all 306 passengers successfully evacuated with 0 fatalities. The pilots were globally celebrated for executing the longest unpowered commercial jet glide in history. Yet the investigation revealed a troubling history. An identical fuel leak had occurred on another flight 4 years prior, but industry-wide warnings to mandate automatic leak sensors were ignored. Flight 236 proves that modern aviation disasters emerge from a chain of compounding, invisible human errors. Often, the deadliest threats to a flight are built on the ground, long before the aircraft ever leaves the gate.